Okay, so good morning, everybody. We are continuing on our studies of Eruvin. We are now on Daf Lamed Dal and Bet. I'm going to start with the Mishnah simply because it'll make everything a lot more understandable. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to get to the then we're going to jump ahead to the Gemara on the bottom of the Daf. Hopefully that'll be understandable for everybody. If it's not, let me know. So we're talking about a case of again, if you put the Eruv in a place it's inaccessible. So Tanoba Migdal, Bavad, Hamafteach, Harez Eruv. If you left your Eruv in a cupboard and you lost the key, Mishnah says that that is a fine Eruv. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Imenu Dash Maftech L'Mkomo Ein Eruv. But Rabbi Eliezer says no, you have to know where the key is. If not, it's not a good Eruv at all. So that's a problem that because it's locked away, not going to work very well. Okay, so now it's jumping down towards the bottom of the page. So we are trying to talk about, we're trying to figure out, the Gemara brought other statements about when it's lost versus not lost, when is it good, when isn't it good. We're trying to figure out what exactly does that mean, right? When is it considered to be good versus not good? So the part says Ihaki Haina Dikani Ale, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ima Ir Avad Eruv Eruv, you must now Avad Eno Eruv. So that was we stated that the Mishnah was only referring to on Yom Tov. So then the question is, what do we the case of where it's slightly inaccessible? So what is the case? Rather, we're talking about a case where we're differentiating between losing it in the city versus in the field. But the question then is that how does the location help us? So what's the difference whether you're in the city or not in the city? The difference is area. Right? You should just been on your way. So it's a difference, right?
Sorry, Rabbi, we're not hearing you very clearly.
Either it's accessible or it's not accessible, right? So which one is it, right? So Ibi Yom Tov, Mali Ir Mali Sadeh, right? If it's on Yom Tov, who cares? Either it's in the city or not. Like my accessibility is the same. So if you're a master of hunting time, let's explain this again because we definitely missed something. So there were some missing words that had allowed this statement to make a lot more sense. So Tanav Migdal, Bena'al B'Fanav, Bavad Maptech, Harez Eruv. So you placed it in the cupboard and you locked it, and then you lost the key. That's fine, right? So this is when the example that you did. So Metzger, when do we say that's okay that you can't go into the key? Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov you're allowed to, as you see in the diagram there, this brick. Actually, you're allowed to basically destroy it in order to access the contents. So on Yom Tov that's fine, and therefore you'd be allowed to do so. But on Shabbos you would not be allowed to do that type of distraction, and in Eruvin it wouldn't work. If the key has been found, then the Eruv is no longer valid. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ba'ir Eruv Eruv, but today ain't Eruv. So it's found in a city that his Eruv is valid because that means that it's always accessible. But if it's later found outside of the field, then it's no good because that means that there is no proper way for you to have accessed the Migdal on Yom Tov or on Shabbos. The question being, not that you have to have had the key, but you could have found the key. And without said the Tchum, there's no way. Right? But Eruv Eruv. And why do we say that if you find it inside the city, it's your Eruv is in Eruv? Rabbi Shimon says, Damar Echad Gadol Fechad Chatzerot Fechad Karbefot Reshut Echad Hein L'Chelim Yeshavtu B'Dova. Right? So all the various roofs, courtyards, and the forbidden spaces that are based in the storage areas, again, that have a status of a karmelit, typically, that's the karpef. They're all considered to be one area in terms of the they're all considered to be one united area for any utensils that happen to have been left in them on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Lasada Enovai Eruvin. And we and we say that in the field is good, it's according to Lachamim. We say that the problem with the field outside is that it's a carmelit, right? So if you find it outside the city, it's always in a carmelit, therefore you're unable to carry it, even on will it be Shabbos or Yom Tov, and then therefore, because again, on Shabbos is because, well, it should be problem carrying, and on Yom Tov you have the issue of being able to walk towards it. So, Rabbi Rav Yosef, Dharma Vayu, Hachad Migdal Shal Eitz Askinan, Damar Savar, Klihu, the Ein Binyan, Bekalim Mitzir, Bekalim Mar Savar, Oalu. So the Rabbi Rav Yosef have a different argument. The question is, we're talking about our little cupboard. Let's see, is that our cupboard we had up here, right? So this guy. So the question is, what's it made out of? This? It's basically this thing is made out of wood. And the question is, if it's made out of wood, does it have the status of a utensil, or does it have the status of something else? So, right, that being, it's actually a structure. It's a tent, right? If it's simply a kli, you can destroy a kli on Shabbos, and that's why it's okay. But if it's a tent, then there's the problem of destroying the tent. So Ufluta the High Tanaim is actually a machloket Tanaim. The Don is learned from Mishnah. Higish al gabe shida teva migdal shmei. That if a zav had knocked into a carriage, a crate, or a cupboard, then whatever's inside is impure because he caused them to move when he hit them. But Rishon won't say that they are not tahor when that happens. My love comment. So what are they arguing about that could happen? Mar savar klihu, mar savar olu. No, what's the argument? It's not the question of really. It's not based on whether or not he moved it or not. The question is was this item that's inside considered to be able to become tamei by the touching of the zav? If it's a kli, it could not be. It could become tamei, but if it's considered to be an ohel, right? So just because the zav touches your house doesn't make your house tamei. Amar Abai, which is bra. So. And Abai says, what do you think is a reasonable explanation for this? Right? Vahatanya, ohel v'nisei tamei, kli v'enonise tahor. What do you mean? How's that possible? Didn't we say that if you shook an actual tent and you moved it, that the zav can make it tamei? But let's say if you had a kli, and then the zav hit into it, but it didn't move, right? Because it was too big or didn't hit hard enough. Then it's tahor, which implies that the issue isn't the touching; the issue is the fact that the item moved. And then it says if they were moved, they're tamei. They say tamei machmat rada tahor. And we determined that what's the main problem is when a zav is matame something, right? When a zav is being, right, because the zav is one of the avodah tuma. Right, it's one of the sources of tuma that makes everything impure. So, but it's limited in its ability to make things impure only if something is movable. But if the thing is not able to be moved, or if it only moved because of indirect contact. Let's say if you're on a rickety floor and then the zav walks by and then you see the item shaking a little bit, so that wouldn't be a problem as long as he didn't directly touch it and make it move. The shaking of the floor is not considered to be sufficient direct force to be tamei the item. So Ela Amar Abaye Dekulin Alma Hesi Amachmat Kocho tamei. So rather, everything follows Abaye, who says that if it moves based on his actions, it's considered to be tamei. But if it moves only based on the vibrations, it's tahor. Then it remains pure. So rather, what's the case here is where it's where it shakes as a result of his direct action. Mar savar have hesed, Mar savar lo have hesed. So the question here is where when he's moving something else, that's what caused the shaking. And the question is that considered to be sufficient moving for the purpose of making something tamei from the zav? That's the question. So then what's the Mishnah talking about in regards to the Eruv that we quoted? So Abaye and Rava, Amarjavayu, B'manul, B'katir, B'matnan, Askinan, Abaye, Sakina, B'matlike. So what is the case of whether Eruv being no good? And what type of lock is it? It's a lock that's attached with a leather knife, with leather. Wait, let's take up a photo. Okay, so here, where's that? Here we go. Everybody can see the type of lock we have here. So it's not one of those really strong metal locks, or even one of the rather, what is it? It's one of these locks that's actually what holds it in place is a piece of leather. And what allows you to cut it is you need a knife in order to cut it. So then it's not the case where it's completely inaccessible, and if you can't find the key, you're not getting in there anytime soon, or you have to do other real lock in order to get it. Rather, all you need to do is a knife in order to cut through it. The Tanakama Savar La Karbiya. So the Amar Kol Kim Talim Shabbat Flutz Bimasar Gadol Be'atei Shalach Resha. So the first Tana, who says that this isn't a problem, would hold that Rabbi Yossi says that all utensils may be moved on Shabbos except for a large saw, the blade of the plow, because those are considered to be, no matter what, muksa and unusable. But on the other hand, a knife, right, could be used to cut this item, and therefore you could easily get your ear out of it, and because it's not a problem interacting with this type of to break this type of lock. Rabbi Elazar Sava Rabbi Nechemia Damar Afilu Talit Afilu Tarvod Ein Talin El Tzar Tashmeshan. But the other opinion has different opinion in regards to muksa. He says that even a cloak or even a spoon are only allowed, which are only. Gives a little bit of background just by this one bit more. So what is the different types of muksa? So there's muksa machmat isur, right? There's an item that is considered to be muksa forbidden for use on Shabbos because its designated purpose is only for forbidden purposes. Then there's kli shamato isur or heter, items that can be used for permitted purposes as well as for forbidden purposes, such as a knife. And then there's also right. So those are items. So we're talking about, and then the third one is that it's muksa because it's so valuable that you wouldn't ever use it for anything else. So we're talking about the interim case of something that is something that you could be used, right? Whether for a allowed purpose or a disallowed purpose. But the question is what you have in mind for that set purpose for Shabbos, and as well as what you're using for now. And we say that you're only allowed to use said item, according to Rabbi Nechemia. The only way you can use a item that is one of the types of muksa is if you had it designated for an allowed purpose. And if it's not for its purpose, it's for its ordinary use, then that you normally use it for, then you can't use it. So unless you happen to have this knife that's always used for cut, unless you happen to be a very interesting type of thief who is always using their knife specifically to cut open people's leather locks. Unless that's your vocation, your normal usage of the knife, that's not going to work. So therefore, you're not allowed to actually access and break and get into the cupboard, even though it's entirely within your capabilities to do so. Okay. So now we're going to move to another type of case, that of we're talking about when the item has now moved outside of the tchum. So here the problem isn't that it's physically inaccessible; it's that's halakhically inaccessible to you. So right? So or actually some of these are ones that are physically inaccessible. So we'll go through now. So let's discuss them now. So the Mishnah says. Itgalgal chutz l'tchum, nafal alav gal on israf, truma v'nitmeit b'bod yom, ein eruv. So if your eruv had, it was a nice round roll and it rolled outside of the city limits, or if it was covered up by a pile of rubble, or if it was burnt to pieces, or if your eruv was made up of truma and then it became tameh, it always happened before Shabbos happens. Eruv. You don't have an eruv. But if this happened on Shabbos, that a strong wind came and blew away the eruv, or something got covered by a pile of stones, or burned up, or became became a food that needs to be burnt, which is the case of truma that became that became impure. So we would say that is that if it's before, the question is outside of Shabbos, what was it? Was it accessible and therefore and usable? Therefore, you have a valid Eruv, or is it not? In which case, you don't have an Eruv. So in that im safek, if you're not sure what time it happened on Shabbos or before Shabbos, that became inaccessible. So Remeir, Rabbi Yehuda Omrim, Harei Zeh Chamar Gama. So Rabbi Yehuda said that if you don't know, you're both a donkey driver as well as a horse driver. So the difference between these two animals is the way that you lead them. Basically, you're supposed to right. So donkey and a camel driver. So a donkey driver you push from behind, and a camel driver has to lift from the front. So basically, if you're trying to do both at the same time, you will wind up in a very uncomfortable position of being stuck between the hindquarters as well as the mouth of two animals, which is not a pleasant position to be in because you're being pulled. Basically, you're being pulled in two directions, or the modern idiom would be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Basically, you're stuck. So that happens. Basically, you have to react as stringently as possible, as if you don't have it, as if the Eruv is not done properly. So Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon say, Omrim Safek Eruv Kasher. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon say that if it's in doubt, then we say that it's a valid Eruv. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Avtomos Hayid Mishum Chamishat Game Al Steak Eruv Shakasher. So, right, so after Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon said their point, Rabbi Yossi says, I did stronger proof. Of Tulmus testified that there was about 5 other elders that an Eruv that's in doubt is a valid Eruv. So now we're going to go and analyze each part of the Mishnah. That's what exactly is going to happen and why it's no good. So it galgal so if it rolled beyond the Shabbat limit. Amar Rava lo shanu el shein gagal chutz arba amot. Val toch arba amot no she'iravo yesh lo arba amot. So Rava says this is only the case if your Eruv was more than 4 amot outside of the Eruv. But if it was within the 4 amot of the Eruv, then of the tchum of the Eruv, then it would still be fine because you get the 4 amot around, and therefore it can go head into the actual tchum. So therefore that'd be fine. The issue is when it's beyond even that 4 amot buffer space. First, that's how that works and why. We'll hopefully get into more details when we get to later on the Masachet when we deal more with the specifics of how tchum works. Okay, nafal of gal, when a pile of stones fell upon it. So you may have thought that this is for the case where the Eruv is actually accessible, where you actually could have access to it. So the answer is though that's not really the case because if that was the case, then it's not really. Then again, that means it is accessible, not it's inaccessible. So lema mandatum blow correctly. So what are we going to say? How are we going to explain the fact that what exactly the case is of the rocks falling down on top of it? So we're going to say it's not like Rebbe, because what does Rebbe say? Kol davar shumash shumashvut lo gozer alav beinash masha. So this is according to Rebbe, who says that anything that is aser b'Rabbanan is only a problem, is not a problem during beinash masha. So this means that whatever the way that the rocks had been deemed inaccessible has to have been inaccessible by a d'oraita fashion. Right, not just that, I can't move the rock because this rock is mokshan, but it's like really right there. But no, it means like actually there's no way of your having access to the Eruv. Not that I could have violated Neshek Rabbanan in order to get it free. No, it means there's absolutely no way that you could get to it. And as far as the way that you could move stones, so the ways to move stones are either you have to designate them in advance on Shabbos. If you have your Shabbos stones, if you wanted to throw at people or play or use paper weights, you have to designate them before Shabbos. Or there is the heter of using three stones if you had to go to the bathroom, because back then they didn't have toilet paper. They used to wipe using stones. But again, that wouldn't really help you in terms of if a giant pile of rubble fell on top of your Eruv. Those 3 stones would be nowhere near sufficient in order to actually solve your problem of Eruv in this case and your access to it. So if you tema, so it's another option. If you tema Karebi, even if Karebi says that it's that your abundance don't apply during Ben Shmasha, well, it's true. I know we still need to state it. Why? Because what's the case? In order to get out of it, in order to get the Eruv out, you need to take an actual kli, a hoe or a spade to move it. And therefore, it would be us midoraita, not only rabbanan, to access it. So even according to review, who's opinion, this could still be problematic. With 3 feet, and we need both the first statement about rolling out of the Eruv as well as the covered by. Why? The Tanagel need galgal mishum letagabe. If you said only because it rolled out, you thought the problem is that it's not near you. Aval nafal of gav itagabe emal haveira. But if you had it next to you, but simply inaccessible because of the pile of stones on it, you may have said that's fine. Nafal of gav mishum demilsa. If you said the problem is because it was covered by stones, you said the issue is that it's covered, you don't see it. Aval galgal zimendate zika umaitile ema lehave eru. But by the case where it rolled away, just like it happened to have rolled away probably by a gust of wind. So now too, the same thing could happen now, that the wind will blow it right back to you, and then you'll be fine. But so there's still the difference in both. It usually that the problem is the fact that it's currently inaccessible, and we're not hoping for some extremely unlikely circumstance of it suddenly being accessible again. But as in, we're not worried about the wind blowing it back, or your pile of stones magically disappearing, or that your nice non-Jewish neighbor decided, oh, this is I'd like to use these stones to build my house now. That's not a reasonable something to have. That's going to happen. Rather, if it's not accessible, it's not accessible. So on Yisraf, Truma need made. So we're talking about then we have the case of if it had been burnt, or if it was Truma and then became impure. So Lamali, why do we need to have both? If it was burnt or if it was Truma and became impure? Tanan Yisraf, the teaching of the being burnt is due to the strength of Rabbi Yossi. Tana Truma nitmei, Meir. So the first part is the teacher has the strength of Rabbi Yossi's opinion, where he says in the Mishnah that if it's that suffix would then be allowed, and similarly by Truma nitmei, the falls of Meir's opinion, that even though the Truma is still there, he's he would play hesitant even if there's only uncertainty about the timing. Right. And the one question is the uncertainty of, can you check if this happened to that or not? There's also the question of, is this item a question of timing is also up for debate here. So Sarah Meir is Fikul Somra. And wait, do you mean to be saying that Meir holds that in the case of doubt, one has to be stringent? Hatanan, Tamesha Radipol, Savek Taval, Savek Lo Taval, Filu Taval, Savek Taval Barbaim Sa'a, Savek Lo Taval Barbim Sa'a, Bechain, Mishnei, Mikvaot, Achad Yesh Barbim Sa'a, Bechad Ein Barbim Sa'a, Betaval, Bechad Mehen, Einu Zebed, Zebed Taval, Svego Tameh. Okay, so that's a lot to unpack. So let's explain it. So basically, we're talking about somebody who's going to the mikvah. There's all these different types of doubts of whether or not he did everything properly. So the question is, you can't remember, did he go or didn't he go? Was there enough water in the mikvah? If there was 2 mikvah, one of which is kosher, one of which is because it has the right amount of water, one of which doesn't have the right amount of water. Right, and all these things, you don't know which one you had done. You're in the case of Safek. We say that it's Tameh. That's the first opinion of the Mishnah. What is this? What is this stated? This is said when you had become Tameh from a stringent Truma, which in this we're talking about Truma. When we say stringent Truma, we're referring to an avodah Truma, the sources of Truma, such as a dead body, or from a zav or a zava, for more on sources of Shema Tara. That's the Tara. now I'll explain as necessary to understand this. But as far as the full din of Tumatara, will be treated at another point. Okay, about Tuma Kala. But what about if it's more lenient, such as those that are Durabanan? Then what? Because Midoraita, you only have the Abachuma, then what? The Abachuma is the Tame, right? But as far as getting to secondary and third degree Tumas, right? So that is only from rabbinic enactment, so that would be considered to be the lesser form of Tuma. So Tuma Kala, and now some examples. Kagon Sha'akal Ochalin, Tmein, Vashata Mashkin Tmein. First, if you'd eaten food that had become impure, or drinking a beverage that was Tameh. If you had dunked in your head under your body in water that was invalid for a mikvah, or if you'd had on your body had fallen 3 load of water that has been moved, meaning water that's no good for a mikvah. Yarad v'taval, and then after all these things you went down to go to the mikvah. Safek taval, safek lo taval. Question: did you or didn't you properly do your tefillah? Mafilu taval, safek taval b'abrim sa'ah, safek taval lo taval sa'ah. That was the question of was there 40 sa'ah, was the proper volume of water in the mikvah? Or in the case where there are 40, there's one that has 40 sa'ah, one doesn't have 40 sa'ah. Or the cases where you went to a place, one that has and one that doesn't have, and you're not sure where you went to. Again, we say, it's supposed before we said Sveko Tameh, here we say Sveko Tahor. Right? Where, again, all these different cases of doubt. Here we say that actually we consider you to be Tahor. So that's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi B'Tameh. So Rabbi Yossi says that actually it makes that you should be Tameh in both cases because Safek, Tuma, or L'chomra. So then the question is, so that's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So that's why he says he's a Safek L'chomra. That's what he says by Tuma, and even in the cases of the Derbanans, he's simply Machmer. So, but what about Rabbi Meir? Does Rabbi Meir agree with Rabbi Yossi or not? If he agrees with Tanakama, so there's difference between Oraita and Derbanan. So I think, then how does that relate to our case of Tchumen? So because of Rabbi Meir, Tchumen to Oraita and Whether what must you say? That after Rabbi Meir also forbid it, is that Rabbi Meir says Tchumen is Mida Oraita. Right? So since Tchumen or Mida Oraita, the Isser of going 2,000 Amot outside of your residence is considered to be Isser D'Oraita, and therefore, when there's a doubt about Tchumen, about the distance you should be going, or anything else related to Isser Tchumen Shabbos, opposed to Isser Eruvin or Isser Hotzah, but Tchumen specifically he thinks it's D'Oraita. Everybody also, on the side of Hotzah, everybody also says that Hotzah is also D'Oraita. But as far as between different eras, that's the place of Rabbanan. But in general, there is an Isser D'Oraita Hotzah. The question, there's debate though about is Isser Tchumen D'Oraita D'Rabbanan, which we have addressed more in depth prior. But for now, now the Gemara here is going to. This is one of the Gemaras is important to know in terms of whether or not Tchumen is actually D'Oraita D'Rabbanan. So Sabar Rabbi Meir, Tchumen D'Oraita. Do we really think that Rabbi Meir thinks that Tchumen is D'Oraita? Ha-tanan, im yachol havli'o. So, are you really going to say that Rabbi Meir thinks that Tchumen are Aser Midoraita? But didn't we learn that when we're doing, because I know this is a Gemara later on, talking about how we measure the Tchum. So so we measure the Tchum and you hit a mountain. The question is, how do you deal with measuring the mountain? Right? How do you, or you hit a steep valley, like how do you deal with measuring it? So, and then there in that Mishnah it says if you can't measure it the way you normally would with a 50-meter rope, which is how you'd measure a normal distance of incline. So, right? So what do you say? So Zomar Rabbi Yostai Bar Yanai Mishum Rabbi Meir Shamachi Shemakadrim Bahari. So Rabbi Yostai said, Rabbi Meir, I heard that if it's too steep, we pierce through the mountains. Meaning we don't go up and measure it. Actually, we simply go right on through. Basically, we measure how wide the mountain is, and then we flatten it. Right? We ignore differences in topography, and we say that it's fine now. As we just pretend that it's flat. Right? You take the bird's eye view, and you ignore the fact that there's a difference in depth as far when you're measuring. But normally, where you would deal with it by having multiple measure with ropes. But here, right, it's too steep. So he's saying it's too steep. Then you know what? Just treat it if it's flat, and go right on through. So the and if you really thought that tchum was doraita, who are you to say that you can magically flatten and cut and pierce through all of these mountains? Didn't Rav Nachman say the name of Rabba, the son of Avua? With the statement of Rav Nachman, quoting the name of Rabba Bar Avua, that we don't let you do the piercing of mountains, right, and ignoring the topographical features. Not for the case of an Ari Mikla, when we're measuring out the distance surrounding a city of refuge, because the area around the city of refuge is the area that the person who had killed somebody accidentally is allowed to flee to and be protected there. So we don't, skimp out and do approximations or flattening or magical flattenings for them. Below Begla Rufa, now we're measuring which city is closest to see which one is supposed to perform the rite of the Egla Rufa, the cutting off the head of the calf to as the elders of that city proclaim that it's not their fault that the person who was found in the field dead is their responsibility. So in both these cases, which are both midoraita, so in these cases, we don't let you do the piercing through mountains or flattening the topographical features. We make you actively measure it. So seemingly there's only two examples of things that are midoraita that we have an issue that we won't let you be mekader, which applies to everything else that you are being able to mekader through must be midrabanan. So if you're allowing them to be mekader to pierce on through for measuring the Eruv, you must hold that Eruv Tchumen and the entirety of Isra Tchumen on Shabbos, right, for prohibition of going outside your boundary, it must be only Rabbanan, not Deraita. No. Lo kasha, hadideh, hadirabeh. No, we can solve this differently. We say that the question of whether or not the Tchumen is Deraita Rabbanan, one is his statement, right? So, and one is his teacher's statement. So that's how you can work out how one case is mach and one case is mekel. Because in one case he's quoting that it's the oraita, which is his opinion, right? And then the case for his mekel, and it looks like he's midrabanan, it's because that's not his teaching. He's quoting what his teacher taught you, but he himself believes differently. Okay, dekanami diktani, and you can also infer it from another version of the statement that we had, that Bezoamar Rabbi Dustai Barat Yanai Mishum Meir. This was said by Rabbi Dustai, son of Yanai, the name of Rabbi Meir. Shemati Shemakadim Baharim, who says that you are allowed to pierce mountains. Right, so Shramina. Because in that formulation, close to the above one, it's much. He's not saying that Makadim Baharim. He's saying I've heard that there is those who pierce through mountains. So that shmua that we're talking about there, that thing that he had heard, is what he heard from his rabbi, but it's not what he actually thinks is the proper thing to be doing. So urami deoraita meir. Wait, so then there's still a problem between two different isurami deoraita in regards to Meir's opinion. So what are these two problems we have? So these two problems we have are we're going to see from somewhere else. So now we're going to what is contradiction? If we dealt with the issue of appears to be mountains. What's next? Naga b'achad b'layla v'eni odea im chai im mate u'l'machar hishki u'mitz'o. So if somebody in the middle of the night, back in pre-modern times when it was night, and assuming it wasn't with a full moon, it was pretty much pitch black. So you touch somebody in the night, and you don't know who you touched. You don't know if the person's alive or dead. When you touch them, and the next day you wake up and you find that the person next to you is dead. So Rameir Matayar V'cham Tamin Shekol Atumot Kishat Mesiatan. So in this case, where you touch somebody in the night, you're not sure if they're alive or dead. In the morning, you wake up and you know that the person is dead. The question is, when you touch them, were they alive or dead? Yes, this is a very weird case. Agreed. Again, there's also assuming that they're sleeping outside, because if they were underneath a covering, then he would be tame either way because of tumat ol. Right? Because if a dead body is underneath a roof, then we say that everything underneath that same roof is also considered to be impure. So again, so it must be outside. This is happening, and then the question is, which did he touch? The only question is, did he touch him or not? And Remeir said that he is tahor, and Chaim say he's tamei. And right, so why does Chaim say that he is tamei? Because you say that you view all the items as you see them now, and that's what would generate our issues. So again, so now comparing this back over to our case. So it appears that Remeir is being lenient, even though we're dealing with the case of Tuma, which is Doraita, because we're talking about Tuma Chamura, a very stringent type of Tuma that comes from a dead body, which is Midoraita, the fact that you become impure. Yet he's saying, if it's in doubt, you are tahor. With Chachamim, the ones who are saying that you'll become tamei, that imply that if it's in doubt, you are for a Doraita, you are tamei, which again implies the problem that Remeir seems to be holding that by that certain things are, by cases of doubt, we are that by a midoraita we are even in subject to midoraita, we're being mitaher. We're saying that you're pure, which is a problem because the other cases of Eruvin, he doesn't seem to say that. So the question is, how does he work that out with doraitas and in cases of doubt? So Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishnatenu Shahaya Aleh Sheret Kol Benesh Moshe. So Rameir says what's the case is where you must have had to have a sheret, which is a impure creeping animal on it the entirety of the time of twilight and the entirety of the time when it's in doubt. Ihachi Bahal Lema Rabbi Yossi Safek Eruv Kasher. Wait, but then so that itself Rabbi Meir's opinion, but that would lead us to an issue of Rabbi Yossi then, because what do you mean by Safek Eruv? It's definitively no good then, because it's been covered the entirety of the time of twilight. So Rabba or Rav Yosef to Amrit Ravai, rather according to Rabba and Rav Yosef, and both of them say, Hacha b'shtei kitei idim askina. Now there's two witnesses. We can testify about his status. Achad omer mibod yom nitma, v'achad omer mishal hasheicha. So the two witnesses, one say that he became tamei before when it was still day. The other one says he became tamei only after nightfall. All right, meaning the truma only came tamei after nightfall. So, okay, so now let's. So how would that help us? So basically, the problem with creating something truma a lot of times is that it's something that in theory you could end up explaining. So what's the way that we're going to construct here? We're saying that how do we create a true case of something where we absolutely have no idea? Is we have two sets of Adam testifying, creating halachic reality simultaneously. So whatever the actual reality is, obviously only one of them could have happened, right? Either it happened before it was dark or after it was dark. The problem is that we have two testimonies which have halachic weight, right? Which have metaphysical effect. and they're in conflict. So therefore, we really have a true case of doubt. Is it A or is it B? So not only is it a doubt of, did A happen or did B happen? It's we have even a stronger case of doubt of A versus B. And Rava Amar Treches Lakula Hacha Chada Chazaka Lakula. No, so Rava says no. That's not the way. We don't solve by trying to figure out whether there's one case or two cases of doubt. Rather, if in case of any doubt, we're not going to try and construct that case. Rather, the question is how many ways do we have in the case of Safek? How many ways do we have to make out? So one case there is two presumptions, right? If the person who's touched the person found dead. If one question is did you actually touch that person, and was the person dead at said time? That's two questions, right? So there's both those things. If they were ruled in your favor, you would become tahor. But hacha chada chazak lakol. Here, there's only one case. To the question of, right, when did the truma become tameh? So therefore, that would be the problem. So therefore, Remeir is mekel. There's two cases of support to be lakula, but there's only one. That's when he would not, and that's how we can solve his seeming inconsistency. Is that it's not based on his being insistent about how to treat a suffix midoraita. Rather, it's a question of how many areas for leniency and how many tzadahakels do you have in this case. Okay, so now let's double on back and do some review. We've got about a minute and a half, so let's sum up what we've been talking about, because there was a lot of topics touched on today. So this way we can hopefully have a better understanding as we move forward. So okay, we started talking about the case of accessibility, we started the permission on the previous Amud, talking about if you had lost the key or not. And the question is whether how accessible is it? Is it in the town? Is it not in the town? I mean, and then it actually comes down to the question in Hilchot Muktzah. It's a very limited case of basically can you or can't you break apart the area that's there in a law fashion. If you can, then you're in the clear. But if you can't, then it's problematic. Next, we have, and then after we debated that, we started talking about if it had rolled outside of the tchum, or if it had been covered, and again whether or not the degree of its being inaccessible, and that had to be beyond a certain point, and also that it has to be completely inaccessible even midoraita, in order for everybody to agree that this is problematic. And then we talk about cases where it's burnt or becomes tameh. So we've dealt with a lot of questions questions of how does tumah work, midoraita or midrabana, which one are we dealing with, as well as dealing with the question of timing as whether it's before or after. And we haven't quite finished the entirety of the Mishnah yet. There still are some aspects to do. And then we continue talking about within the cases of doubt of Doraita versus Rabbanon, and what do you do in the cases of doubt, as well as supports in both directions based on Choma and also based on other parts of the Eruvin to figure out is Tchum Midoraita Midrabbanon according to Remeir's opinion. In the end, we didn't quite conclude. It appears that Remeir still holds that Tchum is Midoraita, or Darius would hold that not. But the question is, how do you deal with cases of doubt? And we concluded that we had Rava's conclusion that the way that you deal with cases of doubt is not by trying to establish the level, is it Doraita or Midrabbanon? Rather, we're leaving the subject as it is, whether it be Doraita or Midrabbanon. And the only question is, how many degrees of doubt you have? You have two reasons to be makel, two tzadim la'akel, two reasons to help you and make it tar. Then we'll rely upon it. But if there's only one, then that's where it's problematic, and we will not allow you to rely on simply one doubt. Okay, so that's it for today. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. And if anybody has to go, well, you're welcome to head out. And hopefully I'll see everybody tomorrow at the same time.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
My pleasure, everybody.
Sure.
That's it.